All right, let's get started. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to our population-focused learning series on veterans, culture, and community. This is our second series of 2020. My name is Isaac Baez, and I am the Engagement and Inclusion Coordinator of StarkMHAR's System of Care grant, and part of my work is to work on cultural and linguistic competency. We are very excited to have you all here for this special event and first time on Zoom. We have a great presentation coming up, as well as a panel discussion on the veterans, culture, and community. We are currently recording this session and we'll be posting it on our StarkMHAR YouTube channel. The Inclusion Toolkit has also all the previous training sessions on our main website. The Population Focused Learning Series will have one more topic for 2020. In your email, you should have received an agenda, a list with the information of the keynote speaker as well as the panelists. And since your input is so important to us, there is a survey that we would like for you to fill out towards the end of the training. This is our first Zoom training for our Population Focused Learning Series. So we ask that you make sure to mute your mic at this moment. During the training sessions, please feel free to write your questions in the chat box. We will make note of these questions and we'll be asking them at the end of the presentation and during the panel discussion. Any questions that have not been answered during the training session will be replied by the panel in an email. All this information, as well as the presentation, will also be included on our toolkit in our website. This training session will help you understand the culture of the veterans community and some of their history. We hope that this information will help you understand the community to its fullest. And let me introduce our speaker. So the speaker that we have today is Tom Chronister. So Tom Chronister is a 1999 graduate of Walsh University, obtaining his master's degree in counseling and human growth and development. Thomas is independently licensed in mental health and chemical dependency counseling, LPCC and LICDC, with supervisory credentials. He currently serves as the director of the Stark County Vet Center, a branch of the Department of Veterans Affairs, as well as serving as an adjunct professor at Walsh University. He has over 20 years of experience working with children, adolescents, and adults, but his primary focus over the past 7 years has been working with veterans and their families. He works with veterans experiencing combat and military-related stress and trauma, as well as a variety of other mental health concerns. He is also a veteran himself, serving in the Army Reserve from 1987 through 1994, active duty as a combat field medic during Desert Storm. All right, let's give a welcoming to Tom and we will pass it on to him.
Well, good morning, all. I'm working through this technology as well, so hopefully my screen is now up. Just by either nod, can everybody see the PowerPoint screen? Excellent. All right. Well, going through the names and pictures, I recognize many of you from the field or past training, so welcome to anybody that knows me or that I know, and all those that I don't know. So we're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking specifically about the culture of military veterans and, of course, how that impacts them, their families, and then us working with them in the community. So I entitled my in service from civilian to military culture to veteran citizen, because what I've found both in my own life and in working with veterans, there's quite a phase from the time they are just, you know, Joe or Susie in high school and decide to join the service till actually going into the service, and then if they serve active duty or combat, coming back into the civilian world. I mean, it really, there's a transition and a lot of changes that go through that. And they themselves change. It's interesting, when I was kind of going through this presentation, I thought of, okay, you take a piece of bread and you put it in the toaster. So it starts out a piece of white bread or whole wheat, whatever you choose, put it in the toaster. After it's toasted, it never becomes bread again. You can't somehow scrape the crust off and make it bread again. It's now something different. And I think that's what typically we see working with veterans or those in the military. Once they've joined and once they serve, especially a combat or a active duty time period, they never go back to just that civilian that didn't have those experiences. And so I think that's one thing that we want to look at as we're working with them. Okay, so just a little bit of history. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the Vet Center. So the Vet Center is really just a branch of the VA. It was established in 1979 with the focus of the combat veterans that came back from Vietnam. Just it didn't seem like the community was serving them. Even the VA wasn't serving them to the best of their ability. So they created, through Readjustment Counseling Services, RCS, the Vet Centers. Very small, much more personal, not big, not real hospital or clinical, really a way to serve veterans. And so over the years, we've added all the different eras from Persian Gulf to Iraq, Kuwait. Even now we can serve those that operate drones, because we realized you don't have to have boots on the ground to experience trauma, to experience some kind of event that's life-changing when you talk about the military. So that's just a quick history of what the VA has done when working with veterans through the Vet Center program. Okay, so, like I said, our mission with the Vet Center is to provide this broad range of counseling. And the one thing we look at is not just the veteran, but the veteran and their families. What we realized is that trauma, especially post-war or post-military trauma, doesn't just impact the veteran. It's their children, it's their spouses, it's their extended family, it's the community, their employer, the folks they work with, their school. So it really just impacts a large circle around them. So we like to address all those pieces. So let's take a few minutes to kind of differentiate and talk a little bit about the difference between civilian trauma and more military combat trauma. And typically, as Isaac said, we'd do this live, and I'm a very interactive person, as you can see, talk with my hands. So I'd love to have this conversation, but clearly it's a one-sided. But I would hope you all agree that there's a difference between, and not that I'm diminishing what civilians go through when they're in a car accident, or they've lost a loved one, or they've had some kind of trauma, like they've been shot. There's robbery. There's all kinds of things that cause trauma, day-to-day life, in the civilian world. What we found is that in the military, especially combat, there's an intensity and frequency difference. So for example, someone, even take 9/11, how horrific 9/11 was, and that event, that whole day of all those lives that were lost. So that was a one-day horrific experience. Someone that served multiple tours in Iraq or Vietnam or another area of combat, they're going through this trauma several times a day, maybe several times a week. So when you talk to them, they've now been in 22 firefights, lost, maybe 10 of their friends over a 2-year period. They've been hurt themselves. There's this frequency intensity. This is a little bit different. We kind of compare it to our first responders, our policemen and our firefighters that on a daily basis are potentially experiencing some kind of trauma. So that's how we kind of differentiate, why is it different from the civilian that experiences trauma to a veteran? Oftentimes it's the intensity and the frequency. Okay, so, looking at our golden handbook of diagnosing is a DSM-5. And one of the main criteria when we look at PTSD is the stressor. Stressor being defined as a traumatic event. And usually we look at these two things. The event did or may have caused death or serious injury to someone, or the response is one of intense fear, helplessness, or horror. Many, if not most of the veterans that, if you work with veterans in your own field or in your own agency, you'll probably notice they experience both of these. There's an event that was pretty significant. It either did or could have caused serious illness or death. There's a lot of intense fear, maybe sometimes helplessness. So they meet both these criteria. And that's something we look at as we're trying to figure out how best to help them. Looking at common problems from anybody that's exposed to combat trauma. Like I said, I don't see everybody's name right now, but so if I were to ask you if you've ever been in some kind of conflict, whether it's a fight, maybe back in grade school, or somewhere where you actually were in some kind of physical confrontation with someone. When we think of a physical confrontation, we think there's a lot of emotion involved, and anger and aggression are part of that. Typically, we don't get in a fight and we're all happy, and I mean, we're aggressive or we may be angry, and you go in ready to fight whatever it is. Well, that's the same experience for someone that experiences combat. They're going in there with a lot of aggression, a lot of emotion, a lot of energy, a lot of, getting ready to fight. What happens when that happens over a period of time, it doesn't go away typically. So it kind of tends to stay there. So even when they're not in situations that are potentially hazardous or harmful, they're still have this sense of frustration or aggression. So we see that. That's a common problem, that it's kind of residual aggression. There could be a lot of self-blame, guilt there again, if they're have been involved in a situation where they've taken a life, that residual effect after that lingers. There could be thoughts of harming themselves, depression, and we see a lot of substance abuse with veterans that have experienced combat trauma. See, these are a whole gamut of things that we typically will work with and try to address. Okay. Also, these are some other symptoms you see. Sleep problems. I think of every veteran I talk to, maybe 1 out of 100 says, no, but I sleep pretty well. Most of them are going to share that they have a lot of problems either staying or falling asleep. There again, it could be due to a lot of mind racing, could be due to persistent dreams or nightmares, it could be due to a variety of things. But that ability to get good solid sleep is an area that has been an issue for, then again, anybody that experiences trauma, specifically our veterans and our military folks. There again, irritability, outburst of anger, difficulty concentrating, being easily startled, and of course, hypervigilance. So with that being said, and if we were lucky enough to be in the same room, I'd do a little exercise, but I'm going to try to do this via the web. All right, so let's talk a little bit about hypervigilance. If everybody would kind of look at whatever room you're in right now, and I'm assuming somewhere there's a door, unless you crawl through the window. So look for the room you're in and find the closest door to you. Just kind of look over at it, if you will. Okay. So everybody has a door somewhere in the room they're in. Okay. So now you're back engaging with me. Now imagine right now someone very loudly bangs on that door, bursts in and starts yelling at you. Okay. So you're obviously your attention is going to be at that situation, that door, that event. Okay. It all gets resolved. They go away. They're gone. How many times over the next 40 some minutes are you going to be glancing at that door or thinking about that door, or maybe even now shifting your chair to look at that door? That is oftentimes when we talk about hypervigilance, that becomes the way of life for a lot of veterans that have experienced intense trauma. They're always wondering, is it really safe? What if this happens? What if I go to the mall or go out in public and someone tries to harm me? How do I know these hundreds of people I don't know at this, this fair are really safe for me? So they become very hypervigilant. They're always looking over the, and so that's just of what that really does to someone when they've experienced something. Now they're always kind of concerned about it. Hopefully you guys don't now stare at the door the rest of the time. I hope I didn't scare anybody, but that's the kind of feeling that they have. And we want to be sensitive to that as we're working with veterans that have experienced combat trauma. Let's talk a little bit about how trauma affects relationships. Many of our veterans, they're again way back from the Vietnam time to the young men coming back now from Iraq, Kuwait, Afghanistan. Typically they're in relationships either prior to going over or they get in relationships after they return. So how does trauma affect relationships? Well, there can be a sense of social anxiety because of the hypervigilance. So they would rather stay in a safe area or a comfortable area. So they may not want to go out and interact a lot. Maybe a lot of anger. You may even see it to the point of violence. Oftentimes they'll kind of numb themselves. They may keep loved ones at a distance, even their children. We talk about emotional numbing. So that can affect intimacy. That can affect parenting. So again, all these things are starting to impact the relationships they're in. And oftentimes when they come in to seek, whether it's social services or medical help, these are the things that they aren't aware of. And the more that we can help bring awareness to that and help them work through that, that definitely is a positive to any veteran that we work with. Okay, so here's some things there again, typically look for when you may be presented with a veteran that shares, hey, I was in combat, I served in this conflict or this war. And this really impacts a lot of veterans when they talk about schooling and wanting to go back to school. They may have difficulty concentrating. Talked a little bit about the relationship problems. They may, due to that hypervigilance, really focus on where they're at in the room. They're going to be sitting close to the wall. They're going to know where the door is at. They may make sure they're close to the door. They may be withdrawn, isolate, avoid crowds. And they stay very detached from others. And there again, these could even be folks that they're close to, family members, co-workers, but they can become very detached. The inability or difficulty trusting others, not showing up. And there again, sometimes we take if they don't show up to appointments as a sign of disengagement, but it could be out of fear, it could be out of discomfort. Talk about the highest emotions, the anger, the agitation. Could be there's some feelings of hopelessness. They've often served their country. They've served, they like I said, they went from civilian, joined the service, experienced work through these, and then we start to address the outside factors that they have less control over. And again, just another quick slide, but that homelessness, joblessness, difficulty getting into school or staying in school, potential legal problems. So they get out and they're struggling with relationships, maybe struggling with substance abuse. Now they get into legal problems. We're very fortunate here in Stark County to have the honor court. So there again, it's one other avenue for the community to help veterans work through the struggles that they're having. Mental health problems, they're struggling with depression, anxiety, PTSD, and of course, marital and family discord. It's them trying to figure out how to kind of re-engage with their family. I talked to many veterans that have served multiple tours, have been out of the home more than they've been in the home, and so their children hardly know them. Their spouse hardly knows them, and they're very different now. So how do they re-engage? How do they assume that role of father, husband, parent, bringing all the baggage that combat trauma brings with it. And then, of course, you add on to any physical injury. Someone that's lost a leg or an arm or had some kind of physical trauma due to their military experience. That just adds another layer of struggles. Okay. So, again, PTSD probably, for the most part, is the most highly diagnosed mental health disorder. You talk about veterans, and that is because of all the combat stressors that occur. And we talked a lot, about I think all of these at this point. They've been personally attacked. They've been attacked. Their unit's been attacked. They've had that experience where they're feeling unsafe. They've had to fight. If you think back of the whole fight or flight, you learned way back in maybe in school or grad school. There again, as civilians, typically we have the ability to fight or flight. We have the ability, if a situation approaches us or something approaches us, or like the door earlier example I gave, hopefully if you're close enough to the door, you have the ability, if you assess and say, hey, this is a situation I'm not going to win, I need to get out of it. You have the ability to flee. Most of the time in a military or combat situation, that flight isn't an option. You're trained and maybe you're even ordered, hey, this situation you fight through and then you push forward for the next fight. So the mindset doesn't give us the ability to think, hey, how can I flee this? It's always, how can I fight this? And how do I fight it to the best of my ability? Take that mindset for a soldier that serves 10 years, gets out, comes back home, now is that post-military combat civilian. The mindset is, hey, there's not a situation I don't need to fight. Everything is not going to be a fight for me. Everything's going to be, I need to prepare to attack the situation, whether it's a physical situation or an emotional situation. They're always on the attack mode because that's what they were trained to do. That's what they had to do. And so oftentimes we're helping them realize every situation doesn't necessitate the attack. You can step back, you can avoid, you can flee from some situations because that's the best course of action. Again, a little side note, but that is oftentimes what we see. They're again witnessing, experiencing the death of either a combatant or someone from their unit, losing members of the unit, a lot of loss, a lot of grief loss, circled around combat trauma, anybody that served in the combat zone. So there again, these things that they're going to bring back with them, and they're going to be in the community, and hopefully our role in whatever we serve is to kind of help them work through that, help them recognize that, and find better, more effective ways to reintegrate as a veteran, no longer just a civilian. Just a quick slide on PTSD specific. A lot of this is repetitious, but we look at all the disorders: PTSD, anxiety, depression, chronic pain, are many of the disorders we see with veterans that have served in the combat. So from combat orientation to civilian life, a lot of times they need a lot of support. Many of the times they need a lot of support. It could be they just don't have the emotional or physical energy to process these events. The war zone memories start to affect their daily life. They distrust the environment, that hypersensitivity of the environment. Sight, sound, smells, things they never realized could trigger something negative are now there. I have a sign on my door. I try to give them out every year, 4th of July, because a lot of people in the community don't realize how much fireworks, loud fireworks, impact a veteran, because that sound, that smell is very similar to what they may have experienced. So I always try to help veterans that live in communities that may not be aware. Hey, put this sign in your yard the week of 4th of July, so your neighbors, your people in the community know that this is something that may bother you. Again, they prefer highly structured, efficient routines. That isn't always available when they come back to the civilian world. You see a lot of veterans, go into law enforcement because that gives them some sense of that structure. All right. And unfortunately, there again, we see a lot of alcohol and drug use as a way of coping. And again, I think that becomes a coping mechanism for many people that experience trauma. But for veterans, there's a high rate of alcohol and drug use when they are really trying to understand or deal with that trauma. It's a way to numb that pain, numb that emotional pain. It dulls the effect in the memories, kind of creates that fast-moving, transient emotional state. If they have issues with social interaction, the alcohol may allow for that without the inhibitions. Kind of helps them feel less alienated and more accepted in social environments. There again, definitely comes with negative consequences, comes with a lot of things that aren't helpful for long-term coping. So, we talked a little about the homeless veterans. It doesn't always mean they're mentally ill. I think that becomes kind of a stereotype that, the homeless veteran is the crazy veteran that just can't deal with it. Rambo, he's crazy, so he has to live on his own, or he has to live out in the woods because, his mental state. Oftentimes it's due to other things, economic displacement. They can't maintain the job. They got a discharge that won't allow them to get VA benefits. Like I said, the emotional, physical, cognitive fatigue, they just get hopeless. And so they found living on the street is their only option to survive. And there again, that's an area that hopefully as time progresses through their governments and agencies, we can really get these veterans off the streets, get them in some kind of housing that they can sustain. We've been talking a lot about it, but the high risk of suicide among veterans. There again, if you're familiar with the Project 22, but at one point the research showed that about every day, approximately 22 veterans were completing suicide. And there again, that falls along with that hopelessness, helplessness, lack of support. They've either through their own actions or through other people avoiding them have been cut off from support. They're not getting it from the community. They're not getting it from the VA. So they feel hopeless and helpless. And typically because of the traumatic experiences, because of that high sense of depression and anxiety, suicide becomes an option for them. And I know that, one of our panelists works with suicide prevention, but just the ability to help support these men and women that feel so hopeless and helpless that ending their life is the only option for them. Being able to help them see positive about the future, helping them with resources, helping them, re-engage with family is so important. And of course, there's always barriers to seeking help across the board, but typically, especially with military folks, they're reluctant. They don't trust. They don't trust mental health services. They don't trust the VA. They don't trust going to share their story with someone that they're going to get help. So they're reluctant to even seek help. They may distrust civilian providers, that they won't understand what we're talking about today, that military culture and how different it is. If there's any kind of military sexual trauma, they may be very reluctant to come out because again, that's a stigma that they don't want to address. So all these things may become barriers to seeking help. Again, as a community, how can we step up and help take down some of these barriers? How can we open doors and provide opportunities for veterans, military folks to seek help and feel comfortable and safe seeking that help, and that they're going to get the help that they need? Like I said, a couple of changes, at least through specific to the V and the Vet Center. For a while, they were very specific with discharge statuses that we could only see those with honorable discharge. At this point, as far as the Vet Center goes, there's no restrictions. We can see any veteran, regardless of discharge status. They don't have to have boots on the ground. They can be drone operators, medical staff that cared for the wounded, National Guard, reserve units as well as active duty. So that's one thing that we really tried to focus on over the years is taking down some of those barriers and really allowing whoever needs help to at least come in the doors, so we can help them the best we can or get them referred to another stakeholder, another agency. And of course, questions, which you can only type, but hopefully during the panel discussion, you'll be able to share some of those questions. So we wrapped up a little bit early, but hopefully that gave you some information, a little bit of background, a little bit of insight into what you guys can do in your own agency or through your own community. And I'm guessing Isaac will probably pop back on, but there'll be some time for some question and answer, and then we'll go into the panel discussion. Thank you guys for giving me some time this morning, and look forward to your questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. I do appreciate the presentation, and we are going to jump into our panel discussion then. But before we start, I wanted to let everybody know I had some trouble with, so I just want to give everybody a heads up, but there's going to be a small gap in between. And so I'm going to read a comment that I have from Jim. If you did post a question up and I did not get a chance to get to it, if you can repost the question so that way I can see it, because I was not able to get most of the questions. Here, and that's, Tom, if you want to close your sharing screen. Get everybody back up on the screen. There we go. All right, so there's a comment from Jim Foley who says fight, flight, or freeze. Although I guess freeze is a more common symptom in a child abuse victim, but it comes up with some vets who feel disempowered to fight or flee the launch of fireworks sound, so much like a motor shell launch. Do you want to add any comments to that, Tom?
I think just that it's the like any of our senses, our brain, when we experience something. I had a presenter years ago share this in service. When a traumatic event happens, all of our senses pick up on something during that event. So if you're in the kitchen and someone breaks in your home, you're going to remember the smells that happened during then, the sounds, so all that happens. So I think that goes along with the fireworks. When someone experiences mortar rounds or some kind of loud weapon in combat, that sound can be could be a backfire. I've heard many veterans say even a backfire of a car has that same sound, and that can trigger an emotional response, or can trigger a reminder of them being in combat. So I think it's just again our body's very unique way of remembering things.
Okay, awesome. If you have a question, please feel free to write it in the chat box right now. Or if you would like to, we'll give everybody an opportunity to unmute themselves and ask the question right now before we get into the panel discussion. So if you really want to add something, you can take the opportunity now and do so. So Michelle says from ICANN, I work for ICANN Housing. I have several vets. It sickens me to have any at all. I see their trauma. I had one with ringing in his ear, all with substance abuse. So a question for you, Tom. When it comes to substance abuse, what does the VA office offers to kind of help the community in that perspective?
Sure. The VA actually has a pretty large substance abuse program. It's called VARC. I'll be honest, I forget what VARC stands for. But Domain Wade Park has the domiciliary, and it has an inpatient program. Most of the CBOCs have outpatient programs. There's one in Akron that a veteran can go there and receive intensive outpatient counseling. IOP, they have. So the VA definitely takes that very seriously and has its own internal program, to deal with substance abuse, from all the way up to the need for residential detox, all those kind of things.
Awesome. And so we have another question from Jim, who says, what helps make a veteran comfortable in a service with someone who is not a vet?
Yeah. And there's a slide I thought was in there but wasn't. It kind of lists the do's and don'ts. And I think the one thing I've heard a lot of veterans say is it's okay that you aren't a service member or have never been in the service. So, what makes them comfortable is not trying to have this sense of understanding them from a point of view that you were there. So saying to, a Vietnam veteran, well, I understand what you went through, when you never served, is really a kind of almost a disrespect to them. So just being honest with them. Actually, my staff here, I'm the only counselor that did serve, but my staff work great with the service members, because they come real. They come with, yes, I have experience in working with veterans and service members, but I'm not one. So help me understand what that's like. That means more than, hey, I understand what it's like. Well, you don't, so that's not probably going to be helpful to go that route.
Sure. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate that. So we're going to move on to our panel discussion.
Real quick, if we do,
yeah.
So another question, SM just means service member, Jim. It's a short for service member.
All right. All right, so I'm gonna have the privilege now to introduce our panel group. And when I say your name, can you unmute yourself and kind of give a shout out so people can see your face as we are reading your bio. So we're gonna start with Serena.
Hello, everyone.
Awesome. All right, so Serena Draper Hendershot is the Outreach Director of the Martin Center 3rd Street Community Church. In her role, she serves to bring equitable resources within the fields of education, health, and housing to reconcile one of Stark County's most vulnerable area in Southeast Canton. She graduated from Walsh University with a bachelor's degree in both political science and history, and has been serving in the Ohio Army National Guard since 2015 as a human resource specialist. Since graduating, she has worked within workforce development, advocating on behalf of minority populations. Serena is known for being a community partnership leader and a racial reconciliation advocate. As she most recently began working for Enlightened Solution as the director of Stark County which is a nonprofit organization doing diversity and inclusion consulting out of Cleveland. Serena uses her voice to speak up for those who have gone unheard, not because they are voiceless, but because they have been silenced. Awesome, thanks, Serena. We're gonna introduce now Rebecca Lindersmith.
Hi.
Awesome. All right. So, Becky Lindersmith, suicide prevention coordinator within the VA Northeast Ohio healthcare system. So Becky provides consultative services to care teams as a subject matter expert in suicide prevention. She provides clinical support to high-risk veterans and also provides outreach and partners to provide education within community agencies. She has worked with high-risk populations and participated in SAMHSA research with HIV and AIDS and substance use and youth at risk. Awesome. Thanks, Becky, for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going on to our next panelist, Brooke. If you would like to say hello.
Hi, guys. How's everybody this morning?
Awesome. All right, so with Brooke and Harless is a retired Army veteran and community volunteer. After her Army medical retirement, Brooke Harless graduated several leadership academies, UMHB with a bachelor's in history and English, and CTC with an associate's degree. Brooke was inducted into the Ohio's Veterans Hall of Fame, Stark County's Women's Hall of Fame, and was a recipient of Stark County's 20 Under 40 Awards, along with the United Way Volunteer of the Year. She works tirelessly on behalf of veterans as a CVA strike team leader, serving Army military board member, American Legion 44 delegate, and board membership chair, MWAN Unit 21 Executive Board, ARC Service to Armed Force Caseworkers, Disaster Action Team member, Ohio Veterans Coalition co-chair, and Stark County's Veterans Task Force. Her volunteerism extends to the community at large through the American Red Cross Board of Directors, Stark County Hunger Task Force Board of Directors, and the Rotary Club of Plain Township's president, and a Plain Local Strings Program parent rep, among other organizations. She was also 2019's Ohio's Mother of the Year and 2019 National Military Mother of the Year. Brooke works to improve the lives of veterans along with enhancing her community, all the while raising her 3 boys, aged 2, 5, and 16, with her husband, Steve. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Last but not least, Ollie, you would like to say hello?
Morning, everyone.
Awesome. Morning, Ollie. So Ollie Golston, retired truck driver who served 10 years in the United States Navy. Ollie served aboard 2 destroyers and an oiler as a mechanist mate, which entailed operating and maintaining the ship's main engine and associated equipment. Currently, he and his wife are raising 2 grandchildren, one with special needs, which is how he got connected with and began attending parent cafes. Since then, he has been involved with the system of care in various ways. He co-facilitates, along with Bev James, the Canton Community Connect group right in his community. He was invited to be a part of the System of Care Leadership Advisory Committee as a family representative to help the community be better served by the system of care. He and his wife participated in a focus group in an effort to help Stark County's behavioral health system better understand and improve family engagement. Ollie and other families from the focus group help shape the families supporting Family Connect groups, which help support families to engage in the treatment process of helping their loved ones. All right. So I, at this moment, would ask for a round of applause, but we can't do that in a virtual platform. So we are going to move on. Again, thank you for our panelists for being here, and we are going to start with our questions. And so again, As we move forward, please feel free to write your questions in the Zoom call. So as we start moving along, just write your questions down and I will try to make sure to answer your questions as we move forward. So I would like to start out with our first question for Tom. Give me 1 second. I have a
While he's looking for the question, I just want to say I'm excited to see other people's faces. So most of the day I just see little kids right now from COVID. So it's good to see adults.
Sorry about that. Thank you for saying that. All right, Tom. So during your years of experience working with the veterans, what is the most common stigma the community faces, and what can we do to change it?
Okay, yeah, and I think I spoke a little about this in the presentation, but I think, you know, one of the stigmas that comes, you know, when veterans experience challenges in the community is just that, okay, you went and served your country, you went and served in the Army, Navy, you know, Marines, whatever. So now why are you struggling? I mean, you should, you know, you get out there, you should have, like I said, the world should be yours. You should have finances and education and experience. And so why are you struggling? I think that's one of the stigmas that there again, it's something they intentionally did, that now when they're in the community, in the civilian world, that they're struggling so much. And I think as a community, that's one thing that we can help the larger community understand that, you know, for the most part, yeah, unfortunately, there's those that, you know, may have made some foolish decisions while they served, and that's why they're struggling. But for the most part, they're struggling because of the experience that they had in combat. It wasn't something that they chose, or it wasn't something that they intentionally said, hey, I'm gonna, you know, struggle with finding a job or getting housing. It's just part of the disorder of PTSD. So I think that stigma that it's their fault or they're not doing enough is really detrimental. And I think, you know, as providers, as a community, that's one thing we can do. So I love the honor court, the ability to say, yeah, you know, this veteran screwed up, they made a poor decision, but as a court system, we're going to step in and help get them more than just a consequence, and really help them, you know, learn from the experience and gain something from that. So I would say that's the biggest thing is to know that, you know, most of these veterans didn't choose to be the way they are now. They don't want to be disconnected from their family. They don't want to be disengaged from their loved ones. They don't want to struggle keeping a job or going to school, but it's part of the you know, the residual of the trauma and the PTSD. So how can we help them and help the community wrap their arms around these men and women and give them the support they need?
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Tom. We have a question from one of our participants. So if someone doesn't have VA linkage or veteran insurance, perhaps self-pay or other insurance, earlier it was mentioned changes that more people can get access to VA services in the community. Would the local VA agencies allow clients to get a VA outpatient counseling and or support groups? If so, is the client responsible as sliding fee if no VA insurance or not officially a veteran, example, contract worker on vehicles and witness explosion while overseas and not a soldier or in the military? Are there free support groups available?
I'll take that. Anybody else can chime in too. So actually, there are some avenues for that. Actually, Walsh University has a great program through, they partner with the military center over in Louisville. So they have the ability to see anybody that served the military free of charge for counseling. So there are some other agencies out there that will either do a sliding scale or free of charge counseling. And there's also, if they're a veteran and they're service connected, there's the ability for, it's called the Mission Act, So if they get approval, unfortunately, there's some things that have to be met, but they can get private insurance, whether it's counseling or even medical, and the VA will cover the cost. So they really have to be in communication with the provider. If they can't get in, if there's not something close where they live, there's so many miles and so long that they have to wait for an appointment. But there are some things out there. They just have to, if they're involved in the VA, get hold of the VA provider. If not, then they can call here and I can give them resources as well. But there are some resources out there that are low cost or free of charge.
Awesome. Does anybody else in the panel group want to add to that?
I would like to add something to that. I see a lot of, I'm actually a disabled veteran as well, and I've had 41 surgeries. So I see a lot, I'm outsourced a lot from the VA. I will say, let people know that there might be bills sent to them because it takes a while for the VA to pay. For instance, when I had my children, I am actually in collections at two different, at Altman from the 2 births of my children because it takes so long for the VA to pay. And if I asked, I said, if I pay ahead of time, will I get reimbursed? They said no. So it does take a while. Same with the chiropractic services I receive. I keep getting the bills for that. And I'm like, no, it's the VA pays for it. They will pay for it. Sometimes it takes up to 2 years, which is unfortunate. And it can ruin your credit. And I see Michelle's face and I can tell you story after story of instances that's happened that I have seen with other veterans as well. So let them know ahead of time that, yeah, they can be outsourced, but be prepared that you're going to get bills if it takes a while because there might be a delay in the billing process.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Does anybody else want to feel free to answer any part of that?
This is Becky. And also, some people choose not to come to the VA, but we do have Operation Zero, which is a phone app that people can get, and you can talk to someone. You can volunteer even to have contact with someone and be available to talk to people that are in some kind of, not a psychiatric crisis always, but just need some support. And that's an option, and I can put that in the chat. Also, Give an Hour provides free care. The Veterans Crisis Line is available to anyone 24 hours a day. And if you connect with us here in Canton, we'll try to get you linked or at least see if you're eligible for care. So many people that we didn't think were eligible, sometimes they're eligible for care. So we want to do everything that we can. And sometimes when I speak, the first thing I say is to make sure that you're getting the benefits that you're eligible for. And I appreciate what Brooke said. And thank you all for your sacrifices that are on this call. But there are so many things that we need to continue to improve and to do better. And when you speak up and you speak out and you obtain the things that you are eligible for, that makes a greater voice, and we need to do more to protect and provide for our veterans and their loved ones and people that care for them. And we can do more. And that's part of our mission here today, is just to be available and to support our providers in the community, because none of us can do this by ourselves. We have to do this as a collaborative effort. That's what we learned about HIV in the old days, that we don't do this alone. And the best way to prevent suicide is to create that compassionate community. And so I'm really honored that you're all here today. So thank you for those that shared and for Tom's story. Appreciate that.
Awesome. All right. We are going to move on to our next question. And we're going to now ask Serena. So Serena, you are currently not a veteran now, but can you share with us some of your lived experience and challenges you face in the Ohio Army National Guards?
Yeah, I feel like this is a loaded question, but I'll try to make it short and sweet. So I joined the military as a college student. I joined 2015, like you mentioned. I was a sophomore at Walsh University. And one of the biggest reasons why I joined is that I could not afford Walsh. And then on top of that, I actually never wanted to go to college to begin with. I graduated high school as a 17-year-old. And my parents would not sign off on me to go to the Marines when I wanted to. I have a long list of history in which when Tom was speaking, I really wanted to go to the military because my brothers were in it. And one of my sisters, she was in it too. And so basically I still had that drawn feeling towards it. And then when I found out about the Ohio Army National Guard, that you could be in school but also be in the military at the same time, it just seemed like a perfect option for me. And so I went and had to take off a semester back in 2015. And so a lot of the challenges with the Ohio Army National Guard is being a college student, but then also being a soldier at the same time. And so a lot of times the Guard does not work around your school schedule, even though like they push you and pressure you to join because they help you pay for school. There was just a lot of challenges of me actually trying to graduate. Back in 2016, I think it was 2016. Actually, no, it was fall of 2017 was my last semester as a senior. And this is when all of the hurricanes were happening in Puerto Rico and Florida. And like, you know, the National Guards were being sent out to help. And I was a senior at the time, about to graduate. And basically my unit was getting ready to deploy me. And I remember like going to my provost, going to our president of the university and being like, I need you guys to send like a long letter saying, I'm not going because I did not spend this money to end up being backlisted again just to graduate again, because I was already behind in graduating just because of just different commitments that I had to do. And I'd also say like the biggest challenge is being a young Black female in the military. And when you're, I feel like the military now, one of the things we always hear is like, you guys are going through the new Army. That's what my brother always tells me. He's like, you're in the new Army now. They're not as strict. They're different. But at the same time, I feel like it has been a unique experience of my own. Like I said, being a young Black female in the military, always being the only Black female within my squad, having to speak up about certain issues that I had with my white superior leadership. And them not understanding the complications that I had. I had a lot of traumatic experiences that have happened to me since joining in 2015. My aunt actually got sick and had a stroke when I was in basic training and AIT training. And my aunt is who raised me, so basically my mom. And so to have that happen and you're away from your family, so all of the things that Tom was talking about, like I have felt personally. And so to have that happen and not be able to connect with my family. And I know that when I graduated from my basic training, my aunt was not able to come down, and only my uncle did and a few of my siblings did. And like that was kind of the reality that like hit me, is that like these are some moments in life where people are either going to miss out on things, or I'm just going to miss out on my family and home structure. And so that was a little, to be only 20 years old and kind of face that, it was kind of a lot to face. And then coming home, she actually ended up passing away a year later. And so to like have that dramatic change happen to me, and then literally when she got extremely sick is when I was in AT training as well. And if you know anything about AT, like you're not going home, you're going to be in the fields, you can't really contact anybody. And so there's just a lot of things that I was processing emotionally, and the military was not very supportive of that, to be honest. And like I would go to the chaplain and it's like, oh, pray about it. Sorry, I don't want to pray about it. I am very strong in my faith, but this is not something I want to pray about right now. I just want to be close to my family at this point. And there was always this, I felt like there was always a disconnection and a lot of the realities of what was going on in my real life, and how to really navigate that as a young soldier in my civilian life. And then to have school on top of that, to have to worry about studies and everything else and the reality of the world around you, it has been a challenge that I haven't always been a fan of. I have a very unique military experience because of it. My unit is up in Cleveland. and I've lived here in Canton for the past probably 7 years now. And to like have to travel to another town to go to your unit, and just there being a lot of cultural differences in Cleveland too, was a struggle. And then lastly, I would just say that I went through a lot of leadership change, which that in itself was awful, because the communication wise, there wasn't a lot of good communication in my chain of command. I've only been in for 5 years, and I've probably had 5 different NCOs that have been leading my S1, and like to have that as an experience, like you have someone coming in who doesn't know how you were when you were first, just a private or whatever. And so there's just been a lot of negative experiences, to be honest, because there hasn't been a consistency in leadership, and our unit itself has also went through so many different changes as well, yeah, I mean, it's just made my experience very challenging, especially being someone who was also in school at the same time. So yeah, I would say that is in a nutshell. I hope that answered your question pretty well.
It did. Thank you so much for that, Serena. Appreciate it. All right, we're gonna go move on to our next question. So one of our participants asked, I lead sessions with some vets interested in suicide prevention. In fact, I have one of them online with me now. What should I make sure I cover with them now that we've done the basics of warning signs, non-judgmental talking, destigmatizing, etc.? And this is open to anyone to respond.
This is Becky, and I'll take that one. If somebody wants to jump in, feel free. But I think it's always good to ask the questions, right? And I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's something that so many people are struggling with. It's just so common. And I think we want to remove the stigma and take away the difficulty that people have just bringing it up, having those tough conversations with people. And as we go into Suicide Prevention Month, I see Donna there on the call. And there is a lot that we can do. So the first thing I tell people, just have those tough conversations. Sometimes I ask permission. Are you okay if we go there? Because so many people, it's maybe the toughest thing they've ever had to discuss with someone. And they'll talk about so many different things, but as therapists and as people that love veterans, we can have those tough conversations. So just asking them, if you had thoughts about taking your life and ending your life. I always want to know about frequency and intensity. How much are you thinking about it? What have you already done? Have you gone ahead to take steps to end your life? I want to know if they've been rehearsing or doing preparatory behavior. And I always want to know about means safety. Do you have a firearm? Not that it's always my business, but I want to do everything I can to make sure that we get through this together and that we get through safely. So do you have excess medications around? Where are the firearms? Are they loaded? Do you keep them unloaded? Do you keep it in your car? Do you keep it on the front seat? Is it in the trunk? Do you have a safe place to keep it? Are the children in the house? Things like that. And we have brochures and information that we can share. But it's so important to have those conversations. And then what are you willing to do? And sometimes they'll give it to a trusted friend or family member, or they may have already taken steps to do that, because veterans know more about firearm safety than I do. And they also know the devastation and the harm that can be caused. And so we do that little risk benefit analysis of like, okay, you may be fearful of, having someone break into your home or while you're driving. Maybe that's a concern for you. However, what's the risk of you taking your life at this time with everything you have going on? I want to know about protective factors. I want to know about reasons for living. Do they have protective things in their life? Are they willing to stay with someone? Sometimes they need the hospital. Sometimes they need an admission. And that's where the crisis line or someone would come in. If you ever are in a session or you're struggling and you're not sure what to do, or you're on a Zoom call and it feels like a crisis and you're not sure what to do, the crisis line is if you have that secondary phone, or you can text, or you can transfer those calls to the crisis line. That's an option. But having tough conversations, looking at the risk and the warning signs, And then if people have done things to already harm themselves, now maybe it's been months and months ago and they're currently safe and they're not at acute or imminent risk, like it's not going to happen in the next 24 hours, we want to work with them. And then I always say, escort them to care. If they need to go to the emergency room, do we need to coordinate for that? Do they need an immediate rescue? And sometimes that happens when you're on a call and it's an emergency. I'm sure Tom and different people here have been on the phone with someone and, you know, they need somebody with them right now and they're not okay to be alone. So talking about getting them to care, expediting it, we can usually see people same day or next day. There's different ways the crisis center is able to go out. They do amazing things. And especially when it comes to the loss to suicide, a lot of our veterans and even people in some of the units have experienced so much loss to suicide, people in their unit or friends and loved ones that have had either a suicide attempt or death, lost to suicide, that can really affect them. Maybe they need post-vention support as well. So those are the things that I like to talk about, but I always want to just walk through that darkness for as long as it takes to get people to a safe place and then make sure that they have the supports and the resources and things that they need. And a lot of times it's gotten pretty bad for a long time. So sometimes it doesn't get quick overnight. You know, if they need immediate care or an emergency room, 911, the Veterans Crisis Line, or Wade Park, I mean, there's so many resources. If you're not sure, reach out to the crisis line, consult with me, or call the clinic here if we can help. We also have a mental health team here that does a great job. We also have clinics in Akron, Ravenna, you know, different places if you need us, but there's a lot that we can do. And there's trainings for your staff too. If you're just, well, you know, we're kind of struggling with this, there's a lot that we can present or even share with you and videos that you can watch and things like that. And then we always do a safety plan too. What are you going to do if it's the worst day of your life? When you leave my office, we want to put a plan together. Which hospital are you going to? Who can you call? And, you know, especially including lethal means safety, next of kin. Sometimes we get release of information. I like to get collateral information because sometimes people don't tell you the whole story. Maybe they're drinking 24/7 or they've been, you know, using a little meth on the weekends. So if you can have those tough conversations, get outside records when you need to, get collaboration with the vet's consent, because obviously you want to have a good relationship and rapport with your veterans. But what I find is that people that are help seeking, they want help and they just want to know where to go. Now, maybe they've had a bad experience in the old days or with, you know, a certain team member or whatever. Hey, we can get them to somebody else. There's a lot that we can do. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you so much for that response. It was really great. Does anybody else want to add to that quickly? All right, I'm going to ask, oh, go ahead, Brooke, you were going to say something?
I was going to say there is, a couple of years ago, myself and another person started the Stark County Veteran Resource Fair with Survey Area Military. And there is over 90 or so different veteran organizations that participate. And there is everything from fly fishing groups to Bible therapy, guitar therapy. There are so many different organizations that are out there for free for a support group, for therapy, for people like that. I know Tom brought up Military Family Center. That's another group. There's every year we have it in November. It's usually the first Thursday. This year, however, due to COVID restrictions, we're not. But please look that up, because tell any of the veterans that feel like they have nobody to talk to, there are tons of resources out there. They, like you said, they just need to find them. And one of the things that Survey Area Military does is show the different resources out there that are available for free for groups, not only for the soldier or the veteran, but for their widows and their families as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we're going to read, before we go to our next question, I'm going to read one more from the participants, and this is again open to anyone. So what housing options are available to vets in Ohio?
I would say Michelle would know how to answer that with I can.
So
I can't help you, right?
So
Michelle would be the go-to person for that.
So local resources would be the best bet for anyone who's a vet to still use that information. So you can use your local resources for housing opportunities, even if you're a vet, to go through to those processes. All right. All right. That's a quick response. All right.
Salvation Army also has some housing options too, so that's another resource.
Yes. And so if anybody, and this is just a quick input, we do have our Stark Help Central. So if you are on our the website of Stark Help Central, you can find your local resources within Stark County for housing opportunities. So don't forget about that, which will lead you to like ICANN, Salvation Army, and other places that have that kind of resources available. It is like your Google search for Stark County to be able to use it for that purpose. And it also has resources about suicide prevention, depression. And so it might also give you some of that aspect too if you are working with someone who's a veteran and going through these symptoms and they need that kind of support, just to kind of lead that way. And I will give it to Michelle if Michelle wants to say something for ICANN.
Yep, just one thing. We are actually talking about having one of our buildings that we had to close down and using it simply for veterans. I think we have 8 units. We had actually opened it for COVID positive patient or people that came out of maybe the shelter, but we had one veteran actually that got COVID, and that was it. And so thank God there was nobody else that needed it. So we are looking into that, but there's very few options other than ICANN. And then there is one for addiction that is escaping my brain at the moment. So, but yes, there's other than ICANN, housing and whatever else you mentioned, but they're all the same as everybody else. And it's a shame that we even need it for them. It makes me angry. So I'll shut up now.
That's fine. Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate that. All right. So we are going on into our next question for Becky. Can you share some of your experience working with the veterans and what would be the best advice to share with those who are not veterans but want to be able to better serve the community? And I know this was probably responded a little bit, but I just want to see like what would be that best advice that you can share with everyone to kind of remember and to hold to when they are working with someone who's a veteran and they're not a veteran themselves.
And the goal of Suicide Prevention Month is just to remind people to be there for veterans, whether it's in your personal life, in your family, it's your father-in-law or son-in-law, anybody. We want to be there for them in whatever way that we can. And I think the big thing is just helping people access that care. Sometimes people say, well, I called and it's going to be 6 weeks. If you can advocate or reach out to one of us, and we'll do whatever we can to make things available for patients and clients and veterans. Sometimes the family needs resources. Whatever we can do to kind of connect them with the community and also to enhance supports, I think that's one of the best things you can do. And I think I'm not a veteran. I was raised by a World War II combat veteran, but I always tell people just be real, be yourself, be honest. Say, I don't know. I don't know what you experienced as a member of this group or that group, and do what you say. Keep your word. If you tell somebody you're going to call them, we need to call them. We need to follow up. And then stay with them. It's not like that one and done where you just say, hey, I saw you one time, and you kind of wipe your hands. And we need to reschedule. We need to follow up, especially for missed appointments. When people are struggling, a lot of times they don't even have the strength or the wherewithal, or they forget. It's so many veterans with TBI and other, just Brooke even shared, just watching kids and taking care of families. And there's so many obligations, and people are doing a million things, and they're doing amazing things, and they're caregivers. They're doing work. I have guys that work out in the oil fields all over. It's hard for them to remember what they ate for lunch yesterday or what they did last night. And so to remember appointments, if we can call and give reminders and ask people, what can I do to best support you as you go through this? What do you need from me? And how can I assist you? And what can we do to make this relationship better? And I tell people, I'm not perfect. If I do something that offends you, I want you to tell me right away, let me know. I tell people you can look at your records, you can look at your notes. I'll read them over with you if you need that. Because sometimes they're concerned about what I'm saying about them. Are they going to lose custody of their children? Are they going to, lose their job? And those kinds of things. And when we talk about suicide, especially that's a really, really tough topic, and people are afraid to open up if they wonder, like, what are you saying about me behind my back? Or are you going to call the police if I don't show for my appointment? I try to have those conversations pretty early in my contact with veterans and say, look, here's what I'm going to, if this is an emergency or you threaten somebody else or yourself, here's how I go about it, and I will let you know if I'm on the phone with you and law enforcement's on the way. Now, everybody has their own threshold and how they work, but be there for them, be supportive, be honest, be truthful. And especially with diversity and inclusion, people have had horrific experiences, and we need to go there and we need to have those tough conversations and talk about those things. So that's something you could do. And I always want to leave information for people to carry with them. You know, if you don't know, let's put the crisis number in your phone. If you, I don't care what time of day or night it is, if you can't sleep, we want to prevent suicide, and there's a lot that we can do. So I tell people, we want to catch you early before you're way downstream and you're almost to the falls. We've got to help people sooner and get them help faster, and that's one thing that we can do. And just encourage them and follow up. Take a meal to somebody if you need to. I know everybody is so busy and people are doing such cool things, but if you have, you know, a minute to text someone and encourage them that you served with, or someone that you know in your neighborhood that's struggling, or maybe they lost custody of their kids. There's so many things that, you know, I'll go with you, I'll take you, I'll drive you, I'll meet you there. Those kinds of things can really go a long way.
Wow, that's really interesting, and I like the perspective that you brought up on making sure that people save the number on their cell phone too. And I think that's a really good way to have that quick access, quick text if they have the text line available, but actually like making sure that they put it in their phone so they're not like wrestling in that moment and it's saved. And they could even change the saved name to another name, you know, like My Little Angel or something like that. So no one knows who are they really contacting unless someone looks on their phone and says, "Who's my little angel?"
Right.
But just to have that there, that's actually pretty awesome. And I do like the part that you mentioned of making sure that we are connecting with other people and making sure that we're checking in. And even a quick check-in. I don't know about you or anybody else here on here, if you've ever had that moment where you remember somebody's name and you feel like just writing to them and saying, "I just wanted to say hi," how impactful that is. Or they say, "Oh my gosh, like I was just thinking about you." And so whenever you have those urges, do it. Text somebody, call them, because you know, even with COVID right now, it can be even more difficult to be disassociated from people, not being able to connect the same way. And so it's so important that we, you know, focus on trying to make sure that we let them know that we're not forgetting, we're forgetting them, that we are there. So thanks for that. I really appreciate that. And just a quick note, there are information being written in the chat box. So I will advise everyone if you can take a minute to look through the chat box, because there are some resources being shared and some guidelines and some places where to go to. So that way you can get a quick notation about that. So I just wanted to make sure that people are paying attention to the chat box too as well. And again, for any more questions, please continue to feel free to write them. And we'll answer those questions to you. And if you don't want to share the question to everyone on the panel, you can direct the question to me personally. I'm going to be under StarkMHAR host. And that's the way you can actually write to me directly, and I'll ask the question anonymously. All right, we are going into our next panel question. And this is going to be for Brooke. All right, Brooke. So can you share some of your challenges as you went through your military experience?
Yeah, I actually was thinking of what I could say, because I don't, you know, it's a short amount of time that we have. So I was trying to think what could be more impactful. One of the things that Tom had mentioned is when a veteran or a soldier goes through a traumatic experience, how they notice smells, or they notice something that normally you would think, why would they notice that? I can't say enough, he is right. I was attacked at Fort Hood over a 3-day period, and the man is in prison for 20 years over that. But when he attacked me and my dogs and my aunt, actually Michelle knows my aunt, I believe, Sally at ICANN, I remember the smells. I remember my cat on the back of the gentleman and stuff like that. Even it's been 18 years, you remember that vividly. I know, I believe her name was Serena, was talking about her challenges as being a female soldier and a Black female. And when I was joined in the 90s, our NCO, our sergeant, was a Black female. And at that time, there weren't a lot of females in charge, let alone a Black female. And there were a lot of challenges with her. A lot of people did not want to listen to her, especially men, especially older men, because she was younger and moved up quickly because she was a hard-working woman. And that was a challenge. After I got out, one of the challenges I had is I had a disability retirement. And for me, I thought I was going to be a lifer. And my ex-husband was still active duty. So for me, going from 1 minute being a soldier, running PT, doing the cadences, doing the firing range, going to Germany, South Korea, wherever I was stationed at, and all of a sudden I'm on the sidelines, but I still see everybody every day wearing their uniform and hearing the cadences. It was hard. So it was a hard transition from thinking my body gave out on me and I thought I could do this for the rest of my life to, wait a minute, I have to see my husband go to work every day and smell his shoes, when he was waxing his shoes and cleaning them and buffing them. And it was hard to transition, and there was nobody to talk to because everybody around me were spouses that had never been in that experience before because they were civilians. And then when I moved here after the divorce, after the attacks, my ex-husband could not deal with the fact that he wasn't able to protect me and my aunt, or my pets. So we ended up, after 2 years of counseling, we ended up a divorce, and we came here, and I had a hard time transitioning because nobody here had been in experiences that I had been in, and there weren't a lot of resources at the time. So I started going around, what can I do? And that's how I got involved with all the veteran organizations I was involved in, and I'm still involved in. And I find that a lot of veterans like to talk to other veterans. They like to be able to share those experiences, and it's a good healing process as well. The Honor Court that I see Lisa Williams is on here, she runs that. Great program. I know Tom had brought that up about soldiers that have gotten in trouble and they tend to go to alcohol or drug abuse and stuff like that. For me, I was very lucky with all the surgeries I had. I have not had that problem. I was very scared to ever try to take any prescription medication, even when I had the surgeries, because my mother was a drug addict who passed away. My grandmother was alcoholic. My father was alcoholic, and they were all bipolar. So for me, I didn't have any outlet. Not only was I had nobody to speak to when I moved back here, but I was a female and there wasn't a lot. One of the things I've noticed is, and I was telling Isaac about this, I'll go somewhere to a local store and I'll say, oh, do you have a military discount I have with military ID? And they'll say yes. And they look at my 6'3", my current husband, he's 6'3" with a buzz cut, and they'll tell him, thank you for your service, not looking at me, the 5-foot tall woman with 2 kids clinging to her side, that I could possibly be a soldier. So that is a stigma that is very common. Everybody expects it to be the older white gentleman that is the Vietnam veteran. And there's a lot of us that are not that are soldiers. The other stigma is I have handicap plates in my car, and people will see me get out of the car, and they've actually yelled at me in front of my children. And my 16-year-old remembers this several times. And they're like, well, I don't see a missing leg. You're not 90 years old. Why are you parking handicap? Why do you have handicap plates? And it's hard for me not to lash out saying, you have to get that stigma out of your head. There's other people who have disabilities that you might not be able to readily see. That's something that we need to work on. The other thing that I'm an advocate for is there is not a lot for females at the VA hospital. If I go up to Wade Park when I was having my children, they don't have the resources up there. So they have to outsource you. And then I brought up before, it's hard because then you have the bills coming in, you have to go through a delay to even get the service because they have to get the referral done, and then they have to wait until that's approved and stuff like that. So I wish there was a little bit better connection with that to help it and make it a little easier. As for me, if I have to go up to the VA hospital to see one of my specialists, I can't usually bring my children. So for me, I have to find a babysitter for 8 hours because it's a full day. It's an 1.5 hour drive to VA in Cleveland. You have 2 or 3 hours up there, and then it's an 1.5 hour back. And it is time consuming. And I wish it was a little bit easier for veterans like myself with that. That's basically what I wanted to speak about. I didn't want to give too much details on everything because I didn't want to bore everybody with everything that I've been through.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. All right, we're going on into our next question, and this is for Ollie. Okay, so Ollie, can you share your experience when you integrated back as a civilian after serving in the Navy?
Yeah, it was pretty difficult for me, seeing as though I had just I got right out of high school. I graduated a little bit early, and my parents signed for me to go into the military. So I spent the next 10 years in the Navy, which, you know, I did have that structured lifestyle, and you really don't have much to worry about because everything is pretty much provided for you. So I had that for 10 years, and then when I decided to get out, I said, well, I prepared myself well to get out. But until that first day that I was sitting at home, did I realize what had happened to me. All of a sudden, it was like I was just out on a limb by myself. And I think I was lucky, but for 2 months, I couldn't get it together. I tried to find jobs. There was no resources like we see today. And then definitely it wasn't the age of the computer. So I'm knocking on doors and trying everything I possibly can. And at the time I had 2 young daughters, and, you know, all their life, the military has provided insurance and, you know, and had the healthcare system, everything for them. And lo and behold, one would get sick while I'm in between, you know, I'm out. So all of that came rushing back to me, and I was saying, now what? Maybe I should have stayed, but I made a decision to get out. And now I'm seeing how hard it is to deal with people in civilian life, because my feeling was this. I went from people who showed you all the kind of care and love you possibly could get to people who I looked at that they didn't care about you at all. You know, they just didn't. I went to the unemployment office one day and was trying to get some information from a lady, and she just kind of blew me off, you know, and I'm saying to myself, man, is this how it is in civilian life? But I was lucky enough to get a job. I was in rural Alabama, and I ended up getting a job out of Springfield, Massachusetts. And when I got there, it was the same thing. It's like the gentleman said in the presentation, that you're so used to the camaraderie and, you know, having close, just people close to you. And when I got to that job, not only was I culture shocked by Massachusetts, because I went from one extreme of the wealth where I was at was very poor in southern Alabama, and then I go to Massachusetts where everything is on the expensive side, you know, and I'm looking for apartments and things like that, and I'm saying to myself, how can somebody even pull this off? But I a couple guys who where I worked at, they took me under their arms and they said, hey, come on, we're going to show you how you're able to do this. But the transformation from military life to civilian life was probably one of the hardest things I had been through. I was 28, and I had never seen I hadn't seen anything other than the Navy. But once I got out and people actually started helping me and moving me along in the right direction, it turned out to be okay. Yeah. And actually, the company that I ended up getting a job for, I didn't know this at the time, but they told me later, is they had actually recruited me because the company had got a big contract with the government, with one of the specialties that I had learned while I was in the Navy. And that's how I actually ended up getting the job. They recruited me there, but it was pretty tough. But I managed to get through it. Now, afterwards, I was married at the time to a young lady, and I didn't realize it, but what I was doing was I was just trading the evils, because the company I went for, you know, of course you travel in the Navy. That's a 6-month deployment. And when I got out, I actually got a job with a company that was doing the same thing. So that ruined my marriage at the time, because my wife really didn't want it. She wanted to get away from the travel and settle down and raise 2 kids. Yeah.
Awesome, Molly. Thank you so much for sharing that. Really do appreciate it. So if there are any other questions, please continue to write down your questions on. And I have another question for everyone, and this is open up. And I think you spoke a little bit about this, Ollie. So if you want to add anything else to this point too as well. So what were the challenges your family faced while you were serving? You know, what were things that they've gone through? You know, what were some of the emotional takeaways that you saw, thinking, you know, you're trying to provide for your family, but then at the same time, there's also these other sacrifices because your time is not being spent with family at the moment. So can you share a little bit about anyone who's on the call right or in the panel group of that experience?
Well,
I can share something. Go ahead, Ollie. I'll speak after you.
With me, it was, I got married at a young age, and we all moved to my first duty station. I'm originally from the Chicago area, but my first duty station was Mayport, Florida. And we traveled, she came down later, and we had a child and everything, but never did we expect, and I don't know why, but being in the Navy, the deployment. And when you're working up to a deployment, you're probably at sea maybe 2.5 months before the deployment, getting all your qualifications for the ship, making sure everybody's trained and everything. And then all of a sudden you take off and go away for 6 months. And then you come back, and then it's like the gentleman said earlier in the slide presentation, you know, I think when I left, my daughter was 3 months old. So I come back, she's 9 months old. She has no recollection of me at all, you know, so you got to kind of sit down and do that. And going from a ship life to back to home, you do everything at a rushed rate on the ship. It's everything's fast. You're eating fast, you're showering fast, you're doing everything as fast as you can. So once you get home, you got to kind of pull back the reins on yourself and try to integrate yourself back into the situation, because the situation is already there for your family. And then, of course, when you have, you know, if you have any kind of problems monetarily, mentally, of anything like that, you can't get back from Spain or, you know, the Persian Gulf and fix problems. So that was probably one of the hardest ones, was being able to work through problems from being distant and learning how to do that at a young age. But I'll tell you that I found out when I was in the military, I actually went through fire, and that kind of stalled one of our deployments. But I used to send my wife home, and she would usually want to go home during a deployment. But we had the fire right before deployment, and she decided to come back. And we decided that she would just stay in Florida all the time. We got a home and everything right there in Florida. But the fire had its mental effects on me. And over I'd say the next 6 to 10 months, I didn't realize it, but I had started drinking and doing things that was out of character for me. And then my wife brought it up, and I guess what I'm alluding to is that how well the military's mental health situation was with me. Because I talk to people now, and a lot of people, I don't discuss this with a bunch of people, but whatever happened to me back when I went that experience on board the ship, it made me angry for some reason. So I had to work with the domestic violence people quite a bit. But I had a very good counselor who came in and took me under her wing, and she taught me how to be able to work and handle and get through a lot of problems that were making me violent. But that's been one of the biggest things, is that over the last 20 years, I mean, that still sticks with me, is the fact that I learned all that while I was in the military or in the Navy.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing that, Ali. And thank you so much for the vulnerability part of just sharing the stories of, so we can have a better understanding of, you know, the stuff that you go through and processing it and trying to figure it out. Especially if you don't feel that you have someone to help you, then when you do find someone, how much that can actually help and improve a person's life. And so that's encouraging for us, you know, anyone who's working with a community member, to think that, you know, they can have success stories and they can actually help somebody move forward and move on.
You have to remember that a lot of the people that you're working with are 18 to 22. You know, that's when we think we're the toughest and the smartest we'll ever be in life. But a lot of times we find ourselves just vulnerable, and we really don't know. We don't have the life lessons. And then being in the military, you don't get a lot of life lessons because they take care of you.
I agree.
Go ahead.
You were talking about, Ollie was talking about some of the issues with his family. I remember in 2005, my 6-year-old was 2, and we were in South Korea and North Korea. We were on the red zone, it's called. It's right in the border at Camp Incheon. And they actually, North Korea bombed our barracks. And my 2-year-old and myself were running from the building that had been caught on fire. And I remember when I got to safety, back then it was payphones. And I remember calling my family here in Ohio, and I told them that we were safe. And they had no clue what was going on, because the media and the news had never picked up on that. And they never got all the details. And then Ollie was talking about being separated. You know, his wife was in one area and he was in the other. Unfortunately, with my ex-husband, we were married for 13 years. And one of the problems at the end of the marriage is when he felt like he couldn't protect me from the attacks, when he went to South Korea on a year-long tour on his own, he had an emotional relationship with his high school sweetheart. And it was hard, because a lot of people don't understand. I still try to comprehend that, and it's been 15 years, why he would not come to me or talk to me, and instead he chose to go a different route. And that is actually a stigma that you hear a lot about, is that spouses do cheat when they're apart for a year or so. And it's unfortunate that that happens. And I know my 4-year-old, well, he's 16 now. When we got a divorce, he was 4, and he doesn't have a relationship with his father. And it's very sad. His father is still in active duty in Seattle, actually based at Fort Lewis. And I try to get him out there, and there's no relationship. So my new husband of 8 years is actually stepdad, and he adopted him and took his name. And I am so thankful for my current husband. And I feel very lucky, and I'm going to start crying, and I apologize if I get emotional. But it is sad when families break up like that, and the fathers or the mothers don't keep in contact with their children, because the children do suffer.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much for sharing that, Brooke. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else who wants to share anything else for that question? All right. We're going to move on into our next question. So, does the culture of the military affect individuals to seek mental health services? So what is your feel about that part? So, you know, being in the military, does it affect the way you actually seek services? Does it hold you back? Does it promote it? What are some of the pros and cons that you notice in that experience?
Yeah. So I'll speak real quick. So yes, as part of the Vet Center, we definitely, now that we have the ability to see active duty and guardsmen, we do get those referrals a lot. And that's typically the reason we get the referral, because they are very apprehensive of seeking services within their own unit. So they know if they come to us for services, the records are separate. That, they're unless they sign a release, the records aren't available to their commanding officer, whoever. So it really is a way for them to be protected, to get some help, some mental health services, without the fear of, like you said, it affecting their promotion and affecting their ability to be eligible for deployment. Those are all real concerns for a lot of the active duty servicemen and women we serve. They have real struggles. They have real relational issues, maybe substance issues. And that doesn't always mean that they're not fit for duty. But that's the term that always comes to mind. Am I going to be flagged fit for duty? So I want to make sure I can get help, but it's not knowledgeable to just whoever. So yeah, I think there is definitely a barrier there when active duty guys and men and women seek service.
I can say it's actually changed a lot from when I got out in the 90s. They didn't even say anything about mental health. They never, when I transitioned to civilian, there wasn't any resources available. They didn't even bring any up. When I was attacked, there was therapy, but it was civilian. They didn't have me on base at all with any of the military therapists. And then now I've noticed here at the VA in Canton, every time I go, they do ask right away, how are you feeling? Do you have any suicidal thoughts? Do you need to talk to anyone? I had a little bit of postpartum with the third child, probably because, and I hate to say, I had gotten fixed from the VA and they did the procedure wrong. So I had my last child at 42 and he was born with some deformities. And that was a little bit of, that was traumatic for me and how to deal with it. And I would go and talk to a therapist for a few months. And I felt like I shouldn't be there because it didn't feel like a warm setting. It was very clinical. It was a guy behind the desk and he never looked at me. He just kept taking notes. And so it was hard. And I just said, you know what, I'll just talk to my girlfriends. And we do need to improve on that a little bit, but they are getting better. As I get older, I see that they are getting better and better with the transitioning of getting that help for people with mental health needs.
Awesome, thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to add anything from that question?
Yeah, I'll add, Isaac. I would definitely say that one of the things that I notice among like myself and then even my peers is just this idea that the mission comes first. And so you don't feel like you can express anything that is going on. Like I said, I had a lot of traumatic experiences happen to me while in the military, and that's just like on my family side, not really with the military, but losing my aunt and losing my mom. I lost my uncle and I lost an ex-boyfriend who got shot and killed. And so in just a 6-month span. And so obviously mentally I'm going through it. I'm only 21 years old at this time. And so there's just this idea that like the mission's first. And also, like I said, like I went through a lot of leadership change. And so one, I don't trust my leadership to even open up to them about the reality of what's going on in my life. And then on top of that, I mean, they're new as well. And so they don't even know my own history to begin with. And I think it was something that Brooke might have said, or maybe the other lady had said, is that my unit has went through so much suicide, actually. I think we had like three different people in like a year that had committed suicide. No one that I was close to, but the people around me were close to them. And so there's just this, I know that when there was a deployment that was coming up, there were so many people who were kind of struggling with if they wanted to go or if they should go because they had like personal things going on. And I remember a sergeant literally telling me that he had to lie to the people and tell them that he was basically crazy because he didn't want to go. And like, there's just like, there's so many things that like come into it that like, even when you say that like you're truly struggling with something mentally, like you have to be like extremely crazy for them to even take the time to really actually do something about it. And that's just one example. I've heard like 3 other people who have gone through the same thing, that like basically they kind of had to have like the record of some psychological situation happen for them in order to even get like true services. And I think on like with my civilian side, what helped me honestly is that Walsh had like free counseling outside of there. And I know like what Tom was saying earlier, just that adjustment from soldier to civilian, I went to counseling just for that, because I mean, to go from something that's so structured, you're having people like tell you like to wake up in the morning, to go to bed at night, like tell you when you're eating, and then to go be a college student where you have no parents, no structure, and you're living with friends. That was an adjustment for me, and so I ended up going to counseling just for that as well. But I do believe that because of, you know, just with us like actually recognizing National Suicide Prevention, like the month or whatever, and really like kind of making it more aware now, that I feel like the system of the military is taking more structures. And I love that there's different agencies that are really here to help veterans really combat the issues that they are going through.
Thank you, Serena. Would anybody else like to add to that question?
Yeah, I'd like to say that when I got into the domestic violence, I was court ordered by a civilian court to go to, excuse me, to go to anger management. But because I knew the military would eventually find out either if I had a conflict or duty, or the ship was going out to sea or something like that, I had to tell them. And actually what they done was they sent me to what was an alcohol counselor. We didn't have a problem with the alcohol, but what he done was he steered me in the right direction to people in the Navy who could actually help me get, also along with going to the anger management, help me mentally get my own act together. And it's like Brooke said, it's more of a hardcore situation. I mean, it's like she said, there's just a person there behind a desk who listens to what you have to say or something like that. But the people that I came in contact with, they were a little bit more caring and nurturing, instead of just saying this is the way it's going to be. So I can't say what it's like now, but when I went through my mental health counseling when I was in the military, it worked well for me. It still stands today.
Thank you. Any last calls? There's a baby.
This is Becky. Can I say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Beautiful. Hi, babies. But the other thing, if people have told us, like at the Department of Defense, it's like they're really good at creating the #1 fighting force in the world, but we're not so good at doing like providing individual care and mental health services and things like that. And there are improvements, but a lot of people just learn to just, you know, I'm good, like some of the videos and things that you see about veteran commercials and things like that, that we just keep putting it down, or we just act like we're a robot. And it's so hard to ask for help. People tell me that it's so difficult. And then by the time that you finally do have the courage to come in, maybe you have to have a few drinks or get high before you drive by the parking lot. And sometimes I meet people outside and they'll come in on their motorcycle. They're not ready to even walk in the door yet. And I'll say, how many beers did you have to have before you rolled in? And, you know, I don't want them drinking and driving, but sometimes it just takes so much courage just to make that first call. So if you know someone, you know, we can meet them, we can whatever. I mean, Tom's crew is A+ over there. There's so many ways we can even connect over the phone before they walk in the door. But it is tough. It's tough. We have a long way to go. So thank you for everybody for sharing your courage. I appreciate it. I'll stop talking.
No, you're good. We have still like a couple of more minutes before we go into our closing. So I'm going to ask this last question. Just to kind of end in a good beat. And I think we went over some of this information, but I still would like to just get some of your input. What ways did you find support within the veteran community to help when you had hard days. So what are some of those positive things that were very helpful within the community to kind of encourage you to move on, move forward, have hope, you know, reconnect with your family and try to find solutions that you were seeking?
I'll be honest, for me, it was other veterans, and not even other veterans in the same era. I worked mainly with Vietnam veterans, and these guys have probably helped me more than any professional I've ever worked with over the years. I mean, them being able to share their experiences, them being able to connect with similarities, with struggles. So for me, it's the biggest support has been other veterans that are willing and able to share their stories, their experiences, and just be real. That's, for me, that's been the biggest support.
Ollie, Brooke?
I would agree. That's what's helped me quite a bit is just talking to other vets. I've been out for over 30 years, but I'm in contact with a lot of my friends who I was in the military with, and they tend to, sometimes they know how to call right at that moment. You know, they know when to call, it seems, and we stay in touch because, like, I've had friends who went through Katrina and the big flood out in Houston, and those guys, I'll call them and say, hey, you know, is there anything you guys need, or, you know, anything we can do to help you guys? And they're always okay, but they love to know that somebody will call and check on them and make sure that, you know, things are going well with them.
Thanks, Holly. Brooke?
I apologize. The 16-year-old has class online right now, so the kids are down here.
You're more than welcome.
I hardly have anybody that I could speak to because nobody's actually been through all the experiences I have. And as a female, it's a lot different. So I give a lot of public speeches, and that's how I cope with everything I've dealt with, because I've had a really hard life. I grew up homeless. My mother was a prostitute when she was a drug addict, and that's how she was able to get her fixes. And then my aunt at ICANN adopted me at 11. They found me living under a highway bridge in Arizona. That's where I lived. And so for me, everything I've experienced, from the attacks to the training accidents, from when I got injured to all the surgeries to everything, I don't have many people to speak to about it. But I find that when I give speeches, that helps with everything, and I think that's kept me sane and helped me helping other veterans has helped as well, and then the kids keep me busy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So we are here at a closing. It is already 12 o'clock, so I would like to first thank our speaker, Tom, for being such an amazing presenter, and to all our panelists for just sharing your stories with us. This has been really incredible and very educational for all of us. So thanks for everyone for coming to our population focused learning series. I hope this event has brought some awareness of the veterans culture and community. Please fill out our survey as soon as you can. Please look at our website for more information about our next population focused learning series 2020, and save the date. It will be on unconscious bias, coming up on September 17th from 10 to 12. Again, just register online through StarkMHAR's website. This is open to everyone, professionals and community members. So if you have friends or other professional colleagues would you like to share the training with, please welcome them. This is not an ending, because this will be our last one for 2020, and hopefully we might be able to continue this, since our system of care grant will be coming to an end at the end of September. But some of the system of care, so the system of care itself will not end, and it still will continue even though we're not under the grant. So thank you all again for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. It was nice seeing you guys. Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.